Chicago's downtown streets were crowded that afternoon. Cars moved slowly through the traffic, while people rushed along the sidewalks with coffee cups, phones in their hands, and places to be. Everyone seemed busy. Everyone seemed focused on their own lives. Near the corner of a quiet side street sat an elderly woman behind a small wooden table. The table was simple and old, but carefully arranged. On top of it were dozens of handmade bracelets made from colorful beads and thin strings. Some were blue, some red, some green, and some had tiny silver charms attached. The woman's name was Margaret. Her hands were wrinkled with age, but they moved gently as she adjusted the bracelets and placed them neatly in rows. Every time someone walked by, she looked up with hope in her eyes. But most people didn't even notice her. Some walked past quickly. Some glanced for a second and looked away. A few even stepped farther from the table, as if they didn't want to be asked to buy anything. Margaret didn't call out loudly. She simply waited. Across the street, a young college student named Sophia was walking toward the bus stop. She had just finished a long day of classes. Her backpack felt heavy on her shoulders, and her mind was full of assignments and deadlines. She was thinking about getting home quickly. But as she walked past the corner, something caught her attention. It wasn't the bracelets. It was the woman's eyes. There was something gentle in them, something hopeful, but also tired. Sophia slowed down. She turned her head slightly and looked again. The small table, the colorful bracelets, and the elderly woman sitting quietly behind them created a scene that felt strangely calm in the middle of the noisy city. Sophia stopped walking. For a moment she considered continuing toward the bus stop, but something in her heart told her to pause. So she walked toward the table. Margaret looked up and smiled warmly. "Hello there," she said softly. "Would you like to take a look?" Sophia smiled back. "I was just curious," she replied. She leaned slightly closer to the table and began looking at the bracelets. They were simple, but beautifully made. Each one looked slightly different from the others. "Did you make these yourself?" Sophia asked. Margaret nodded proudly. "Yes, every single one." Sophia picked up a bracelet made with deep blue beads and a tiny silver star charm. It was delicate and elegant. "This one is really pretty," Sophia said. Margaret's smile grew wider. "That's one of my favorites." Sophia turned the bracelet gently in her fingers. "How much is it?" Margaret hesitated for a brief moment before answering. $5. Sophia opened her wallet and pulled out a $10 bill. She placed it on the table. "I'll take it." Margaret blinked in surprise. "You gave me too much." Sophia shook her head. "That's okay. You can keep the rest." Margaret looked at the bill for a moment, as if she couldn't believe it. Then her eyes softened. "Thank you," she said quietly. Sophia slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Margaret gestured toward the bench nearby. "Would you mind sitting for a minute?" Sophia glanced at the time on her phone. Her bus would arrive in 15 minutes, so she nodded and sat down. Margaret folded her hands on the table. "You remind me of someone," she said gently. Sophia tilted her head. "Who?" "My daughter." Sophia's expression softened. Margaret looked down at the bracelets for a moment before continuing. "She used to sit with me while I made these. She loved helping choose the colors." Sophia listened quietly, but one day Margaret said slowly, "She was in a car accident." The city noise faded in Sophia's mind as she listened. She didn't survive. Sophia felt a quiet sadness in her chest. "I'm really sorry," she said softly. Margaret nodded. "For a long time I didn't know what to do with my life after that." She picked up a bracelet and turned it gently between her fingers. "So I started making these again." Sophia looked at the bracelet on her wrist. "They're beautiful." Margaret smiled faintly. "I make one for every good memory I have of her." At that moment, a white car pulled up beside the sidewalk. A man stepped out quickly and walked toward the table. He looked relieved when he saw Margaret. "Mom," he said with a small laugh, "I've been looking everywhere for you." Margaret smiled warmly. "I'm right here." The man turned to Sophia politely. "Hi," he said. "Sorry if I interrupted." Sophia shook her head. "Not at all." Margaret looked between them. "This is my son, Daniel." Daniel nodded. "Nice to meet you." His eyes then moved to the bracelet on Sophia's wrist. "Did you buy one of these?" Sophia smiled. "Yes." Daniel chuckled softly. "You picked a good one." Sophia looked curious. "Why do you say that?" Daniel leaned slightly against the table. "My mother designs jewelry." Sophia blinked. Margaret waved her hand as if dismissing the comment. But Daniel continued. "She actually started the design that inspired our company." Sophia's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You own a company?" Daniel nodded. "A jewelry company." Sophia looked at the simple wooden table again, then at the bracelets. Margaret chuckled quietly. "I just like meeting people here. Sophia, you'd be surprised how many people walk past." Sophia looked down at the bracelet again. Suddenly it felt more meaningful than before. Margaret gently reached across the table and touched Sophia's hand. "You stopped," she said softly. Sophia smiled. "I'm glad I did." Margaret's eyes sparkled kindly. Sometimes the smallest kindness tells you something about the world. Sophia nodded. "What's that?" Margaret looked at the busy street, filled with rushing strangers. "That good hearts still exist." Sophia stood up when her phone buzzed. Her bus was arriving. She waved goodbye and walked toward the stop. As she sat inside the bus, she looked down at the bracelet again. It was simple, but it reminded her of something powerful. In a city full of strangers rushing past each other, one small moment of kindness had connected two lives. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change someone's day forever.